Okay. So how can I be a resource for you today?
Well, I'm reading over what you already
Okay.
got on here. Thank you for that. I know you emailed that to me somewhere along the way.
Yeah, well.
I use the word appreciate with a sense of irony or sarcasm. I think if we go backwards on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we had talked, I think it was last time I was here, about where it would come from that I was feeling like this sense of I'm a young person and everything. And then this epiphany, if you will, on Christmas Eve, so my sister is a special person in that there's stuff going on, but never been officially diagnosed, doesn't want to be diagnosed. The idea of being diagnosed is like not a good thing, which was not helped by my mom consistently comparing her to my aunt who was schizophrenic the entire time we were like growing up and stuff would come up. Great times. Also used with a sense of irony or sarcasm. And so how that's being lived out now is Erin's kind of, she was kind of a caretaker for my dad. Whether or not he needed it, I think he felt that was giving her a purpose at the time. And then since he passed away, the cat has become the recipient of the caretaking. Yeah. Who is now 17 and a half. And I joked with Katie the other day that I think TJ is hanging on now thinking he needs to care for her more so than anything else. Like I think in any other situation TJ would be like, I'm at peace and I can go now. That's how
now the cat understands he has to give Erin something.
Yes,
some
to live
purpose
for.
in life.
Yeah. There are moments where that makes a lot of sense in my head. So in any case, so Erin does very little to take care of herself, and we've been wrestling in the last few weeks with whether she realizes the way she cares for herself reflects to other people that fact, or she thinks that like somehow it's you can't tell. We were talking to her about asking if she, like, you know, when you dress for an interview or you look to go for a job, how might how you're dressed affect that? And she's like, well, I think people would be able to tell that I care about other people a lot. Like, okay, I think they would tell that you care about yourself. I think they would tell that I care about a lot of other people. And there's just no, whether it's intentional or not, and that's always been the wrestling match we've had.
Yeah.
So that's all just some backstory for Christmas Eve. Was the first time she's come to church at Braddock Street since I've been there. And I don't remember last time she was at Pleasant Valley before. My mom tries to come when I preach, especially now, because it's once a month and she's half an hour away, and that's her way of supporting me. And invites Erin, and Erin usually wants to stay home and take care of the cat. Missed commissioning, has missed family events to just be home. And so it was nice that she came for Christmas Eve, but we did the whole, you know, passing the peace thing, and I bent over to pick up something off my pew so I could go do my job, and I just feel this tossing of my hair. And there's like one person who I let do that at this point in my life, and it's Katie. But she wouldn't do that there. And so looking up and the sense of pride on my sister, like I almost wanted to like flip the pew over and go back and like smack her. And it was that moment of feeling like maybe this is where that whole like demeaning thing comes from. And I know it was even more fun because it was right in front of Kirk, and Kirk loved it because he thought it was cute. And it was just like, let's have all of these things come to fruition 2 seconds before I need to stand up and talk to people. And thankfully I just buttoned it all up for the time being and dealt with it later in terms of processing, because I feel like sometimes in our job that's what we get to do. But it was cool and annoying in the sense of like, okay, I guess this is where it comes from, that I have a sister and a mom who at times treat me like I'm younger because it situationally works better for them, or that's how I perceive it. And I say sometimes for my mom, and all the time for my sister. Like she likes to remind me that she's the older sister, and that's about all I feel like she has to hold. And I think it feeds into the caretaking thing, the idea of like she somehow still has a purpose in that role. And I realize I get really frustrated by that because I don't. It's not reality to me.
Yeah.
And so my sister choosing to pick being in front of lots of people who I work with to model that was problematic for me. And yeah, I think I haven't gotten to the next step of that yet. But I was like, hey, at least I named something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, what you know about self-differentiation. What do you think your next step would be in reflecting on this?
I think, well, I guess if I were to go through the process of naming, like, it's okay that I felt that way, and then knowing, like, okay, that's not the way it is, and I know that, so now I probably should work on not being so reactive when it happens. And then throwing ideas of like, well, should I tell Erin that I don't need her to do that? I've tried telling Erin I don't need her to do that. That has, 0 ratings of success so far. But kind of one of those just like letting it go things. I know forget what person I read this with, I don't think it's a unique idea. When you're doing meditation and you have thoughts come in and you kind of push them back out like a little boat on water, and just let them sail away. And so instead of getting caught up in the fact that I'm trying to do this thing and stuff's coming at me and now I'm upset because stuff came at me, it's like, okay, it's here and I'm letting it go again. And working on that being something that happens versus the flipping table path that I've gone on lately. Or lately, I mean like pretty much since I've been I'd say I've been in Braddock Street, but it's been for longer than that. With the moments of where I feel like I'm being treated a certain way only because of my age. Nothing else is taken into effect. Have annoyed me before. And so moving from the reaction being now I'm annoyed and I'm frustrated, I'm going to vent about this, to okay, like I felt this and I'm going to let this feeling go because I don't need to have it. Or I need to have it, but I don't need to hold on to it.
So how problematic do you think this feeling is of yours?
It's not, I think it's gotten better. It got better before, and I think moving and being in a new community changed it. Again, the pastor I worked at the last church I've known for a really long time, and so there were moments where he would make jokes, but it was different in that he usually wasn't around people. It was just me and him. And so he'd make a joke about me being like his little brother or something along those lines. And that was kind of fair for our relationship. And so it would just be like grumble, and I'm done with it, move on. Having Kirk be so clearly wording his at times that I am like a child in some ways to him because I remind him of his kids. I think somewhere along the way after my dad passed away, I got this stick in my side that was, I don't need another dad. And that, I don't know if I ever really dealt with that. I think I just know it's there. And then I hear it and it's like I don't mean it to come out. Like I know people care about me and I'm fine to have people who look at themselves as father figures. Not anyone I've mentioned yet, other people in my life. People from the church I grew up in that have known me forever, I understand where they would look at me that way.
Right.
But that thought pops up every once in a while. Like I don't need another one. And I know it took me. It wasn't hard for me to have a relationship with my father-in-law, but I think it's because I had to spend a few weeks before proposing to Katie and all that stuff, like being like, okay, this is coming, and like I need to be ready for this. And so. I think that's the like way back part of it, and on the outside of that is the because I don't need another dad, I expect to be treated as if I'm a grown person at this point, and don't need to be taking applications for anyone to talk down to me like that. And seeing it as talking down to me probably comes out of that. I don't know how to say. I don't know if that's putting a wall there, but it's probably putting a gate there. my shield and spear ready to go for anyone who knocks on it.
I mean, because, I mean, it's really striking. I mean, I hear you. I mean, it's almost as if someone makes a comment about you're being young, and you are young. I mean,
it's true.
it's true. I mean, you're younger than I am. So
True,
you're-
yes.
All right.
Yes.
So, it's. I mean, your reactivity to that is quite noticeable.
Yeah, and those things I mentioned, and I am fairly certain, for whatever reason, like, my dad got sick when I was 13, and that was after the whole bankruptcy thing and all that stuff. So there are days where it was like, I never got to be young for that long, and I felt like I had to grow up early.
Yeah.
And so to be told those things, I think, just strikes that nerve
Okay.
in the back.
So you hear it more as, man, correct me if I'm wrong. You hear it more of as a slight on your maturity.
Versus like an actual recognition of my age.
Okay.
Yeah. The moments where I'm told that I'm a young person in general doesn't cause the reaction. It's the talking to me as if I'm green behind the ears, I guess is the way to look at it. Versus just being a young person. That strikes it. And so coming from people that, like my sister, who knows what we've been through, whether or not it's the same in her head as it is somewhere else, she knows what we've been through, bothers me a lot. And then having people, I guess, touch on that without knowing the story also bothers me. So, for example, when Kurt says stuff like that, there's part of me that's like, this isn't my first job, and you don't know me enough to talk to me like that. And I think that bothers me.
What do you think realistically is the intention of others pointing out your inexperience?
I think a means of relating with me, a means of naming a reality, because at the same time as, yes, I've had a job before, I'm less experienced than they are, and that makes sense. And in some ways I think it's like naming that I'm learning, and I believe on their intent that that is a good and okay thing, and these are things I have not done before, and so that's where that's coming from. I think for me at times it's that whole like, it feels a little like I'm giving you permission to say you're not as good as something else, or you have room to improve, and that feels weird. And that we're going to bracket that because I haven't looked that way at all in a long time. I just think that's there. And so I don't believe anyone does it with the intention of belittling me, which is where I at least am bringing up the fact that I should probably figure out how to work on this kind of thing. And I think the way the emotions went in my heart in theory, but my head too, on Christmas Eve, in that like 5-second moment, and I was like, all right, I don't want this to remain the same way anymore. Like, I want to be able to process this better. So.
Well, I kind of expect that, when people start seeing you in your 50s, here's my experience. It's been kind of weird. Is that, and I know that there's assumptions about groups of people by age.
Us millennials.
And I guess that, I was either completely unaware of it when I was your age or not. And people made comments, but I had one couple said, we're not really going to be able to listen to you till you get some gray hair. So luckily I started going gray when I was 28. So,
I've got one poking out here too. That's funny.
But I mean, the other side of it is on this side of it. You know, there's what I'm more aware of is the assumption that people past a certain age,
Mm.
you know, are inflexible, old-fashioned. They're not up to date. They're have an inability to learn,
Mm.
kind of thing. So, you know, I just point that out that that I mean, I think the reality of life is that people are going to pigeonhole you no matter how old you are.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a matter of what you're going to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how are you gonna confront it? Are you gonna let it stew in you? Is it gonna continue to bother you, or is there something to learn from it?
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm questioning.
That's my guess, is that there's something to learn from it, and so far those thoughts have been, what I'm learning is that there's, like, you know, other stuff that's probably caught in my family of origin, as the report would say, that's probably causing that. Because there are times I've heard people say things and it doesn't register the same way. I think when it comes from my family, it's just annoying because it's coming from my family. And I think when it comes from a supervisor, it doesn't feel like the collegial response. It just feels like for lack of better words, a parental response.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm out of that moment, I can understand why that parental response might be there. And I know it's not a very large reflection on anybody's leadership ability or anything like that, if that's how they would choose to relate to me. In the moment, it feels like you're not here to serve that role for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe something I could say in the future is there a way you could communicate that differently to me that honors that collegial relationship more so than how we've chosen to relate to each other so far, or really how you've chosen to relate to me so far?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. And I mean, I think that there could be some productive and fruitful conversation that comes with that.
Yeah.
Not that Kirk needs defense, or defending, but I mean, he's not aware of your experience with his issue.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those, it's funny when, again, these conversations between my head and God and the wall, when I think of how to communicate that, it's like, so I can either give Kirk the oversharing story and sit him down for an hour and just tell him about my life, and then end with, this is where I would like that because of that. Could also just be, hey, for me, what works really well is being coached, if you will, in a more collegial sense. I don't do as well when that coaching is focused on my age and inexperience. I do better when it's focused on just the task at hand and how it could be done differently. That takes effort. That on some days I'm less likely to want to give and more likely to just... Because it's true, it really is just so easy just to like go off in your head and just, this is the train I'm going on and we're going to roll on it. And I think I've been trying to break that habit more often, at least the last couple of weeks, with stuff. And it's shown, and I'm a lot less stressed, minus every once in a while incidents at work, in the office and stuff, than I was the first couple weeks I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there's moments where I'm like, hey, that means I'm being productive, and then I stop because I was like, hey, I did productiveness. I'll stop back here now. Lifelong, blah blah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, we're all hard hardwired by our family of origin, for better, for worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as Bowen and others rightly point out, that, you know, maturing is looking at those things that we hang on to and cause us reaction in time of the anxiety, and work at those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's hard. I mean, that's really hard work.
Yeah,
Hiding and distancing are so effective.
They are, though. When you said in class on Monday, you're like, one of the big steps is to reconnect with your family. Like, oh, jeez. Golly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's funny when, it's almost like when that bubble of anxiety gets popped. There's that moment of, like, when you hear a balloon get popped, it's like, oh gosh. And then it's like, it's over. Like, it's done. It's been popped. But there's still that, like, dread of the noise it makes when you pop it, that it's just like, well, I'd rather just leave that balloon over there and let it just, it's floating just fine, or sinking just fine. Yeah. So, we will come back to this. I think what went on this morning for me, which kind of felt like I was at least more prepared in terms of the what's gone on in my past and what was happening in the moment, was that we had a couple folks in the hospital. It was fun today because I was trying to get my day scheduled to make sure I made it everywhere, and so I went, and the first 2 people had gone home when I was there. I was like, sweet, like, this makes my trip so quick. And the last individual is more just the father of a church member who's there. And so he has the flu right now, which is, man, I got to glove up and mask up and was only in there for like a minute or 2 and said a prayer and was leaving. And we do this fun thing with our hospital visits where we put an event in Google Calendar and then just update it like a log every day, and then just end the event when they leave the hospital. And so for whatever reason, this gentleman's thing got messed up. And so there's that like little gripe of like, oh, someone doesn't know how to use Google Calendar, blah, blah. I was trying to fix it, but it meant I didn't leave the hall. I was standing by where the elevators are. And the lady comes out and it was like, hey, Sean. And I was like, oh, hey, I'm still here. And then just, poof, her entire family tension story just dumps out. And it's like one of those moments, like, as she just keeps going, you realize, like, I think she's in a place where this is just cathartic to keep talking. And so didn't want to leave, was mindful of the fact that, like, well, there was that moment where it was like, well, the entire half an hour I just saved, like, I have used it, this is wonderful. But hearing her talk about, like, how her brother has used money from her dad's account to do stuff to fix a house up that didn't necessarily need it, probably with the anticipation that he was going to get it when he died, and so using his dad's money to fix up the house so that he would have a better house to either move into or sell, and that he was potentially a narcissistic person. It was an official diagnosis, but she believes that. There was an article she printed out, and she knows that must be it, and there potentially was some, like, just the passing moments of blah, 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 blah. I know that I was ranked number 2 because my mother knew someone sexually abused me, and then that it was more important to protect her than protect me, and just kept going.
Wow.
And so, like, these, with the person whose my relationship to this point had been, we said hello at church, and she's told me that she likes my, what word did she use? My diction when I preach. And so, like, okay.
Hey, take any compliment you
Exactly,
can, right?
yeah. She was like, it's because I'm a musician. I'm like, I've known musicians. I'll take the compliment, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
But to not have a relationship and to hear all these things, and it felt very much not even like, I know there's nothing I'm going to say or do, or it's like my job is just to sit here and listen. But also that moment of like, my goodness, what are you doing to cope with this? And I tried to slide that question out there, and she mentioned, I'm going to, since we're in a safe place, she mentioned talking to Joanna. I was like, well, okay. But it was because Joanna knows more of her family, because they used to go to a church Joanna was at back where I lived in
Okay.
Northern Virginia. And so one of those like, is that more for you or more so you have more information to continue to roll with? But it was just that moment of experiencing like my own family had the lying and the deceit and the breaking stuff up. It's kind of funny the narcissistic part. I was like, I dated a narcissist once, so that's over there somewhere. And but feeling like I guess now I'm struck with how I can best follow up with that person in a way that still respects in a not mean way, the lack of relationship we have. I know that if nothing else, I definitely became her pastor today, but how I can do that without it being prying into the stuff that just came out because of a tense situation.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts now in the moment about following up with her?
For a little bit, see how it plays out. The dad was supposed to have surgery, and so if he's still in the hospital for a few days, I'll end up seeing her again because we rotate our days in the hospital. If for whatever reason he goes home before that, then I'm an email person, so email makes sense. Next thing will be if I couldn't find her email, a phone call or something, and just say, hey, I just want to follow up and see how you were doing with everything going on. And if it turns into a fine, and that's it, like, okay. But the thing I feel like I want to encourage is the idea that make sure she has someone that she's talking to, and knowing that I'm not supposed to be that person for several reasons, given what I'd already heard today. Like, to me, finding a counselor that's a female, that's someone that can hear that stuff, is the healthy response that should take place. And so the next time I'm in the office, it might be looking up, just so I can say, hey, if you're thinking of this, I can recommend a few people, and you can go from there. But that's where I'm at right now. And then it's one of those things where, like, that feels right and, like, kind of textbook, but then it's like, well, is that actually, does it change because she's already shared all this stuff with me, or is it part of the job to just kind of take that in and hold it and just respond in, I don't know, a different way?
Yeah. So, but you say she's already has a relationship with Joanna.
Yeah. She's been to church at least long enough that, I mean, Kirk and Joanna are the ones that know her the best.
Right.
And so I was thinking of asking Kirk if he was aware of family tension. I don't think, that's the other thing I kind of struggle with sometimes, is when you're on a staff in that sense, how much of that makes sense to share, because there's we are in this together as pastors and kind of need to be aware of those things.
Yeah.
And how much of it would be just me rehashing the conversation to him, and I don't want to do that if that's not what needs to get done.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I think your steps make sense to me. The only thing that may raise up my antennas is if you insert yourself in a relationship that is already ongoing with Joanna. That would be the only thing.
Right.
So, but I think your ideas seem appropriate.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, when she mentioned Joanna, I just said I'm happy that you're thinking of talking to her. And I mean, I don't know. I don't see a time anytime soon where I would be able to go around and follow up with Joanna and ask if it was did you feel like it was more gathering information or more of a pastoral conversation? And if I did ask that, it wouldn't be to know what got said.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be to know, okay, she is getting counseling in some way,
Yeah.
or she's not.
Right.
And so, no, I think whether I would ever want to go to Joanna for counseling aside.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it makes a lot of sense for her to go to Joanna, especially with all that and the dynamics at play.
Yeah. I just didn't. I could see the potential for a triangle between you, this woman, and Joanna.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to get
Not
involved
be.
in any way other than guess the awareness of it.
Sure.
So, yeah, that was one of those moments where 1 second the thing that matters the most to you is figuring out Google Calendar, and the next thing all this stuff, and that's how this job goes, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it does. I've never been able to predict when, a hello in the hallway is gonna wind up being a 20-minute conversation.
Yeah, the power of actually asking how are you and waiting a second for the response is pretty incredible. So.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I look forward to your process reflection.
Yeah. And then, so I guess, time we at? Just
Yeah, we're okay. I may have to end about 5 minutes early
That's
because
okay.
I have to go on the other side of the building and to another meeting.
Gotcha.
All right.
Fun Thursday. It is
Yeah,
Thursday.
It is Thursday.
The stuff with Dick. So
Yeah.
that was. I've tried to. I think part of what affected me, and I haven't read word for word all the responses you have here, so feel free to raise them up again. My experience with death and dying and everything like that in my life mostly has been pretty quick type stuff. Well, my dad had cancer for 7 years, and the first he was in ICU for a month, he left. The end was 2 days that it
Yeah.
took.
Okay.
And my grandma died in a day. We heard of my other grandma passing away after she had died. My one aunt made it a week with a brain tumor. Like, they're all pretty quick ends. And so going in, I knew it was going to be weird for me being around folks that's probably not how it was going to go for a lot of them. It was going to be more drawn out. And so seeing the change in Dick is the first time in a while I've seen someone go so dramatically and still be here. My last church, I was around for a woman who got the start of dementia, and it was severe enough by the end that I think she called me her son at one point on the way out the door. And but that didn't feel as acute as seeing Dick 6 hours a week and knowing the conversations we've had and how he still struggled with where he was sometimes, but in this moment not being able to talk and his hands shaking and everything. And so they had taken him back to the room, and I went for a walk first off because I was like, I don't want to just insert myself right away, especially if they need to assess stuff and everything. We got like a coffee and came back, and they had gotten him out, and he was sitting and just his arm was just shaking, and it was shaking up, I think, the other residents that were aware that it was happening. But it was one of those things where, like, that's where he just had to be at that moment. And so I ended up sitting with him for a minute and trying to, like I said,